The movie is set in 1986 New York, during a time when crime and drugs dominated more than ever. Largely due to the drug lord Nino Brown and his gang, the Cash Money Brothers. The gang is only just beginning to gain notoriety in the city, but they do so in brutal ways such as throwing one of their debtors off a bridge. On the other hand, undercover detective Scotty tries to buy drugs from a young gang member named Pookie, but the latter snatches his money bag and escapes on his bike. With no other option, Scotty chases him on foot through staircases and bridges. On a set of steps, Pookie loses his balance and falls onto the train tracks, and luckily he is not hit by a train. The pursuit reaches a playground where Scotty shoots Pookie in the ankle, disregarding the presence of civilians, which leads to his suspension from the police force. Meanwhile, Nino meets with his childhood best friend Gerald, who assures him that crack, a variant of cocaine, will be the future of his business. Nino decides to follow his advice and presents it to his entire gang, which is composed of his hitman Du, the gangster Keisha, Nino's girlfriend Selena, and the technology expert Kareem. Nino proposes an ambitious plan to start his new drug empire, take over the Carter residential building. However, there is a problem. Miri, the trafficker who controls the place. To begin with, Keisha mercilessly kills one of Miri's sellers with a single shot in broad daylight. After that, Nino drags Miri out into the street completely naked, making it clear that the Carter building no longer belongs to him. Gradually, Nino's gang rises to power by expelling several families from their new property, eliminating other gangs, and selling a tremendous amount of crack. 3 years later, we see that Nino's empire is prospering more than ever, while the civilians living near the Carter constantly report it to the police, who have done nothing about it, except for Detective Stone, who asked Commissioner Fred to let Scotty and another officer named Nick join the case. Though Fred isn't pleased with these two options, they are the ones who know the streets best. When Scotty learns of this, he thanks Stone for the opportunity, but does not want to work with someone as impulsive as Nick, although he has no other option. On the other hand, gang member Frankie, representative of the Italian drug lord Eriteo, tries to collect taxes from Nino, but Nino flatly refuses when Frankie informs him. Eriteo does not get upset. He simply prefers to wait for Nino to make a mistake another day. Scotty and Nick are watching a charity event organized by Nino, who was handing out goods to the poor, among whom is Pookie, now an addict to crack. Scotty decides to follow him to his homeless shelter, where he takes pity on his situation and sends him to rehabilitation. After several days of withdrawal and meetings with former addicts, Pookie recovers completely, especially thanks to Scotty's constant help. In return, the young man wants to repay him by becoming his informant. He contacts a colleague to infiltrate the Carter building, which houses everything from a drug addict's haven, a crack laboratory staffed almost nude, to an exclusive lounge for loyal customers. Days later, the Cash Money Brothers are celebrating New Year's Eve in a nightclub, where Nino personally thanks Gerald for his loyalty. Soon after, Frankie and some gangsters pay a visit, bringing a gift as an offering of peace, a statuette of an African-American hanging himself. Nino does not take long to react. He smashes a glass on Frankie's face and cuts off his ponytail. As for the rest of the Italians, they are easily expelled by Doe and Keisha. After celebrating on the dance floor, Nino and Selena go to a private lounge with Gerald, his girlfriend, and Unqua, who pays more attention to Nino and even tries to seduce him with a provocative dance. Nino begins to succumb to temptation, earning him a scolding from Selena, although he reminds her that she has nothing to claim ownership over him since he has given her everything. Elsewhere, Stone gets upset with Scotty for hiring an ex-addict as an informant, though he changes his mind when Pookie reveals that he was hired as a guard for the Carter. Therefore, the police send him to that location with a camera hidden in his belt and a microphone attached to his chest. At that exact moment, Gerald decides to promote him to the laboratory, but for Stone, that implies many more risks, as he doesn't believe that Pookie can resist taking drugs. His doubts are confirmed day after day as Pookie struggles constantly with his addiction until he finally consumes some of the merchandise. Gerald quickly discovers that Pookie is high by his erratic behavior, and worst of all, he also finds his spy outfit. Immediately, Gerald's gangsters begin dousing the entire building and the park with gasoline. Scotty and his men arrive to rescue Pookie. The police force their way through thugs, drug addicts, and flames, until they reach Pookie's bloodied body tied to an explosive that is about to detonate in less than a minute. Fortunately, Nick, an expert in bombs, manages to defuse it 2 seconds before disaster strikes. The downside, however, is that not only did they lose Pookie, but they also failed to obtain any evidence on their side. Nino, who was making love with Unica, receives a call from Gerald, who recounts the incident. At the next gang meeting, Nino is furious to the point of stabbing Kareem in the hand, solely to point the blame at Gerald for losing the Carter. The following day at Pookie's funeral, Stone informs his colleagues that the operation was a complete failure, all because Scotty trusted an addict. Nevertheless, Scotty does not intend to abandon his mission, as Spooky would have died in vain. And although he had his differences with Nick, the latter joins his crusade outside the law. Thus, the two pose as drug traffickers and make a deal with Frankie to bring them to Gerald, presenting themselves as his new suppliers. Soon after, Scotty meets the rest of the gang. However, Nino makes it clear that he still does not trust him, so the mafioso begins spending time with him to get to know him, confessing his drug addiction and that he shot the first person he saw, a primary school teacher. On another day, Nino is donating money to a reverend when a local old man known as Oldman bursts in, accusing Nino of destroying the community. The old man even draws his weapon to shoot him, but Scotty grabs him from behind and kicks him out. Thanks to that, Scotty earns Nino's trust. And if that wasn't enough, he also confesses that Gerald tried to make a deal with him because he wants to usurp his throne. At another moment, while the Cash Money brothers attend the wedding of the Reverend's daughter, Nick takes advantage of the opportunity to snoop around Nino's mansion in search of evidence and manages to find some discs. At the end of the wedding, almost everyone had already left. Areteo decides to attack by sending a group of hitmen to assassinate Nino, who uses a little girl as a shield. Upon seeing this, Scotty tries to shoot the mafioso from behind, although he must protect himself from the hitmen. In the ensuing chaos, Keisha rushes in to confront them, but ends up being riddled with bullets before the Italians flee. Afterwards, Selena accuses Nino of being a murderer, and he simply kicks her out of his mansion. Shortly after, he exacts his revenge with a motorcycle and a submachine gun, catching Areteo and his henchmen by surprise at the outskirts of his bar. Meanwhile, Scotty and Nick regain Stone's support thanks to the discs, but there is still not enough evidence to convict Nino. Therefore, Scotty infiltrates a drug deal with the gang while the police wait outside. During the exchange, Kareem recognizes him as the detective who shot Pookie years ago. This sparks a firefight between the criminals and the police, during which Nino takes advantage of the shadows to slit his enemies' throats, while upstairs, Nick shoots Dew. Although Dew tries to drag Nick down to make him fall, fortunately, Scotty shoots the gang member, who surprisingly does not die upon falling and tries to ambush him, only to be executed by Nick's bullets. After escaping the firefight, Nino meets with Gerald, accusing him of being a traitor for allowing a detective to exploit his ambition and his drug addiction. In response, Gerald calls him selfish, reminding him that they built their entire business together. Yet despite that, Gerald still believes in reconciliation because of their past as great friends. Nino embraces him, moved, but then he threatens him with his revolver, reminding him that their lives can never return to the way they were. With much pain and tears in his eyes, Nino decides to execute him. Meanwhile, Scotty and Nick interrogate a neighborhood kid who reveals where Nino is hiding. The duo immediately storms in, while Nick handles the guards. Scotty himself brings Nino to the fire escape, where the civilians watch from below, happy that someone is finally standing up to this criminal. After giving him a beating, Scotty throws Nino into a pile of garbage, continues hitting him, and reveals that the primary school teacher he killed years ago was his mother. At that point, the detective threatens him with his gun to put an end to him. But just then, Nick, Stone, and Selena convince him to trust in justice as they take Nino away. Nino triumphantly declares that in less than a week he will be free again at trial. Selena testifies against her ex-boyfriend, despite all the risks that entails. However, Nino declares that he was only a minor member of the Cash Money brothers and could not leave because Kareem, the real leader of the gang, had his mother under threat. His deception works perfectly. As a result, he only receives 1 year in jail for sharing information while Kareem is arrested. At that moment, Scotty regrets letting Nino live, sarcastically suggesting that he come work for him once he's out of prison. When he leaves the courtroom, Nino is greeted by a crowd of journalists. While he is talking to them, the old man reappears with a gun and shoots him in the chest. Of course, the old man is arrested, but he has fulfilled his duty, which greatly pleases Scotty and Nick. As those present gaze upon Nino's corpse, a text appears stating that this story is fictional, but that there are many Ninos in the real world who are taking advantage of the current system's passivity to destroy society with their drugs.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.